France deploys fleet in Greenland to intimidate US Navy. Then Russia shocked this. At exactly 8 a.m. local time, the Arctic sky over Greenland hangs low and metallic, a ceiling of steel pressing down on an ocean that looks calm only from a distance. Beneath that surface, beneath the drifting ice and fractured floes, the most sensitive sensors on Earth are awake. Satellites sweep in polar orbit. Radar arrays hum across frozen coastlines. Submarines prowl in silence. And at this exact moment, the balance of power in the high north begins to tilt. Without warning, reports surge through NATO channels. A French carrier strike group is moving toward the Davis Strait, pushing dangerously close to a US military exclusion zone around Greenland. At the center of the formation, according to radar returns, is the nuclear-powered aircraft carrier French aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle, escorted by air defense destroyers and support vessels. The signal is unmistakable. Paris is making a statement. Inside Washington, the temperature rises instantly. The United States has been tightening its grip on Arctic strategy, reinforcing radar coverage, expanding undersea monitoring, and treating Greenland not as a remote outpost, but as a strategic hinge between North America and Europe. Under President Trump's hardened second-term posture, any perceived challenge inside this perimeter is operational. NORAD's early warning systems flag the French formation the moment it crosses a defined threshold. Within minutes, orders move down the chain of command. The U.S. Second Fleet shifts to the highest state of readiness. At sea, the nuclear-powered supercarrier USS Gerald R. Ford turns into the wind. Deck crews sprint across non-skid steel. Catapults cycle. General quarters echoes through steel corridors. What appears to be a transatlantic rupture between two of NATO's oldest allies is unfolding in full view of the world. From Paris, President Emmanuel Macron projects defiance. The message is clear. Greenland is not the unilateral chess piece of Washington. If the Arctic becomes a zone of exclusion, Europe will not remain silent. French naval radar systems operate at full emission. Fire control arrays sweep aggressively. Rafale marine fighters launch and conduct deliberate flybys near U.S. detection envelopes, their engine signatures deliberately impossible to ignore. To outside observers, it looks reckless. Why would France abandon emission control procedures in contested waters? Why broadcast your electronic signature at maximum power in one of the most monitored maritime corridors on Earth? Because sometimes the loudest signal is deliberate, a calculated move designed to pull attention, trigger a response, and set the pace of the encounter. Sometimes the loudest signal is bait. Washington's public response is ice cold. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt steps to the podium and delivers a statement that appears dismissive, almost taunting. European soldiers, she suggests, will not influence American strategic objectives in Greenland. The phrasing lands like a diplomatic slap. Commentators begin whispering about fractures inside NATO. Moscow watches carefully, and that is precisely the point. For while surface ships posture above the Arctic Circle, another navy is calculating risk beneath it. The Russian Northern Fleet has waited years for precisely this kind of chaos. Two NATO powers radiating sonar, jamming frequencies, saturating the electromagnetic spectrum. In that confusion lies opportunity. Undersea movement becomes easier when the surface is noisy. Acoustic camouflage thrives in turbulence. From deep-water bastions, two of Russia's most advanced attack submarines slip forward. The Yasenem-class boats, Russian submarine Kazan, and Russian submarine Novosibirsk. Among naval analysts, they are described as black holes in the ocean. Quiet, fast, armed with Zircon hypersonic missiles capable of threatening targets at extreme range. The plan in Moscow is elegant. Use the NATO confrontation as acoustic cover. Exploit the chaotic sonar environment. Slip through the GIUK gap, the strategic corridor between Greenland, Iceland, and the United Kingdom, into the broader Atlantic. From there, the eastern seaboard of the United States enters theoretical range. On paper, it is a masterpiece of opportunistic maneuver. At sea, the choreography intensifies. The USS Gerald R. Ford launches EA-18G Growlers. Their mission is to erase clarity. Advanced jamming pods ignite. White noise floods tactical frequencies. Civilian monitoring stations across multiple countries report unexplained interference. Satellite feeds flicker. For a brief window, the South Greenland battle space becomes an electronic storm. Arleigh Burke-class destroyers surge forward, bows cutting through Arctic swells at high speed. French escorts mirror the motion. On the surface, it looks like brinkmanship. Two Allied fleets testing nerve, pushing holes and radar locks to the edge. Below the surface, sonar transducers from both sides pound the water column. Active pings ricochet off ice shelves and submerged ridges. The acoustic picture becomes a labyrinth of echoes. For submariners, this is both blessing and curse. Noise hides movement, but it also distorts perception. Inside the command module of Kazan, confidence grows. Russian satellite reconnaissance reports smooth progress. Pump jet propulsion remains masked by surface chaos. Speed increases. The gamble appears to be paying off. But at 3:30 p.m., something shifts. Data streams that should be hostile begin to synchronize. Tactical links once presumed adversarial align with precision. Encrypted frequencies between French and American systems lock into shared timing cycles. The illusion fractures. There was no fracture. There was no NATO civil war. The entire confrontation, every radar spike, every aggressive flyby, every public statement, was a single, orchestrated deception designed to force movement beneath the sea. For years, Western naval planners wrestled with a silent adversary beneath the waves, a Yasin-M submarine that, when motionless and patient, becomes almost a myth. Passive sonar hears nothing but ocean. Anti-submarine patrols sweep vast grids and return with empty screens. A predator that refuses to move is nearly impossible to corner. There was only one way to drag it into the light: force it to move. Force it to choose speed over stealth. Funnel it through waters where every shift, every turn, so every surge of power could be measured. So, they reshaped the sea itself, and corridors were created. 15 French specialists, reported casually in press briefings as a minor deployment, were anything but ordinary infantry. Inserted quietly onto ice floes along projected transit routes, they established a lattice of high-sensitivity hydrophones drilled directly through Arctic ice. These devices remained silent in the water, gathering every vibration and whisper that passed through it. When Kazan and Novosibirsk accelerated to exploit what they believed was acoustic cover, the faint signature of pump jet turbulence, normally indistinguishable, reverberated through this carefully positioned sensor web. Coordinates streamed instantly to U.S. naval operations centers. The trap closed without a missile fired. At 4 p.m. hours, U.S. and French destroyers executed a synchronized maneuver. Active sonar arrays were directed toward the submerged contacts at close range. Maximum power pings tore through the water column. Under specific Arctic conditions, such focused acoustic energy can create violent resonance against submarine hulls, disorienting crews, and overwhelming onboard sensors. Inside the Russian vessels, systems overloaded, displays saturated, human equilibrium faltered under intense pressure waves. Above, a Boeing P-8 Poseidon skimmed low, releasing training torpedoes to box in the submarines. No warheads detonated, none were required. The message was absolute. Continue forward. and you risk catastrophic system damage. Launch, and escalation becomes irreversible. Dive deeper, and your sensory blindness worsens. Faced with constrained options, both submarines initiated emergency surface procedures. Steel hulls breached the Arctic surface under the gaze of NATO reconnaissance assets. The ocean's black holes had been forced into daylight. The humiliation was not merely symbolic. Every acoustic nuance, every resonance pattern, every stress response had been recorded by the hydrophone network. The most guarded secret of the Yasin M class, its acoustic signature profile, was now part of Western databases. And then came the final revelation. Post-operation satellite analysis confirmed that the carrier strike group detected by Russian radar was not what it appeared to be. The French aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle had never entered the contested zone. Electronic decoys mounted on Danish support vessels, combined with cyber-layered spoofing operations, created a convincing carrier-sized radar signature. Digital ghosts sailed where steel never did. France's visible aggression was theater. The true striking power lay beneath the ice with 15 specialists and a mesh of passive sensors. Moscow had mobilized premier strategic assets to counter a phantom fleet, and in doing so, exposed its most advanced submarines to a prepared net. No missiles were launched, no hulls were breached by explosives, yet the strategic impact rippled outward immediately. The GI-UK gap, long considered a contested artery, was effectively sealed through information dominance rather than kinetic force. Greenland transformed from disputed edge to fortified gateway, not by occupying it with divisions, but by integrating it into a seamless sensor fortress. The Arctic revealed a new kind of warfare. In this confrontation, noise was weaponized. Public diplomacy became camouflage. Apparent alliance tension masked synchronized intent. Russia gambled on chaos and discovered choreography. For naval strategists, the lesson is sobering. The next decisive blow in great power competition may not come from hypersonic speed or explosive yield. It may come from forcing an adversary to move at the wrong moment, along a path already measured, inside a battle space already owned by unseen networks. The Russian submarines retreated under escorting surveillance, carrying not physical scars, but something more damaging: predictability. Once an acoustic fingerprint is captured in detail, invisibility fades. Future deployments will operate under a shadow of detection. For Washington and Paris, the operation demonstrated that alliance cohesion can be weaponized as effectively as hardware. For Moscow, it underscored that opportunism in the Arctic now carries amplified risk. The high north remains frozen. The ice still drifts, but beneath it, the balance has shifted. And now the real question emerges. Will Russia adapt quietly, redesigning its acoustic doctrines and dispersing further into deeper bastions? Or will it seek retaliation in domains less visible? Cyber networks, space-based assets, satellite constellations that enable this new sensor-driven dominance. Because if this episode proved anything, it is that the nature of victory has changed. The most decisive outcomes no longer depend on explosions or visible destruction. They depend on control of timing, of movement, of information, on shaping the battlefield so precisely that the other side reacts exactly as planned. No fireballs, no dramatic last strike, just quiet, deliberate orchestration. And in today's world, that is often enough. If this deep analysis gave you clarity beyond the headlines and exposed the hidden mechanics shaping the Arctic power struggle, make sure to support the channel, subscribe for future strategic briefings, and activate notifications so you're ready when the next classified scenario unfolds.